It was a quiet afternoon in the luxury suite at St. Luke's Hospital, where the sun softly filtered through tightly closed blinds, illuminating dust particles floating in the air conditioning. Clara, the responsible nurse, moved with silent efficiency around the bed where Arthur Enigo, a renowned finance magnate, lay under heavy Egyptian cotton sheets. Clara delicately adjusted the monitor beside the bed, her eyes fixed on the numbers that should indicate the proximity of death, but which strangely showed a suspicious regularity. Arthur's breathing, though weak, was too stable for someone in his supposed terminal state. She looked at his face, trying to detect any sign that would corroborate her suspicions. "Is everything all right, Mr. Enigo?" Clara asked, with a measured dose of concern in her voice, while lightly pressing his wrist to gauge his response. Arthur slowly opened his eyes, turning his head toward her. His gaze was blurry, but there was a sparkle there that did not go unnoticed by an attentive observer like Clara. "Yes, dear, just a bit tired," he replied, forcing a weak smile. His eyes barely blinked. His voice was too firm. "I understand, Mr. Enigo. It must be exhausting, all these tests and medications," said Clara, as she continued to simulate checking his vital signs. "I'll let you rest a bit now. Do you need anything else before I leave?" "No, Clara, thank you. Maybe just a bit of silence," Arthur said, closing his eyes again. His chest rose and fell with a regularity that poorly matched his diagnosis. Clara nodded, placing the medical chart on the table next to the bed with a sympathetic smile. She headed to the door, closing it almost completely behind her, leaving just a crack open. Noiselessly, she slipped back into the room, her heart beating a little faster with the adrenaline of what she was about to do. She quietly approached the large closet next to the television, slowly opening it and hiding behind coats and hospital gowns hanging there. The space was tight and dark, but Clara barely breathed, her eyes fixed on the bed through the crack left by the closet door. From her position, she could clearly see Arthur. She waited, counting the seconds in her head, each tick a hammer in her chest. What would she see? Was she about to discover something that would completely change the course of her job? It only took a few minutes for Arthur, thinking he was alone, to sit up in bed with surprising agility. He reached for his cell phone on the bedside table, typing something quickly with a focused look that showed no sign of weakness. Clara watched, astonished, as the implications of what she saw began to form in her mind. She knew she needed more information, needed to fully understand what was happening. What Clara would discover next would be crucial, not just for her understanding of the situation, but perhaps for Arthur's own well-being. With her heart tight with tension, she continued to watch, preparing for whatever came next. As soon as the door closed behind her with a soft click, Clara took a few firm, decisive steps down the hallway, her shoes echoing slightly on the cold, well-polished hospital floor. She stopped upon turning the corner, briefly leaning against the cold, tiled wall, and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision. Her eyes fixed on the ground, she pondered the possible consequences of her actions in the next few minutes. With a firm nod to herself, as if confirming her resolution, Clara turned on her heels and quietly made her way back to Arthur's room door. She carefully opened the door, avoiding any noise that could betray her presence. The luxurious suite was enveloped in sepulchral silence, only the soft sound of Arthur's breathing filling the space. Clara stealthily moved toward the built-in closet, her heart pounding against her chest. She opened the closet door just enough to slip inside, and with almost imperceptible movements, she closed it behind her, leaving only a narrow slit. In the dark confinement of the closet, Clara adjusted her position to have a clear view of the bed through the slit. She waited, almost not breathing, her eyes daring not to blink. The silence was almost palpable, each second stretching on forever. Suddenly the bed creaked slightly, and Arthur rose with an agility that Clara did not expect from a man supposedly on death's doorstep. He sat up straight, a stark contrast to the frail figure he presented to doctors and visitors. His gaze was focused and alert as he reached out to grab the cell phone resting on the bedside table. Clara watched, fascinated and shocked, as Arthur unlocked the device with a quick swipe of his fingers. He began typing something with impressive speed, his fingers moving with a dexterity that belied his stated condition. She tried to read the expression on his face, looking for signs of anxiety or guilt, but found only a calculated calm. Arthur paused for a moment, tilting his head as if reading a response. He typed a few more words, then stopped and listened. Clara held her breath, her heart pounding so loud she feared he might hear her. Then, with a sudden twist, Arthur spoke in a low tone, almost a murmur, but clearly audible in the silence of the room. "Yes, I'm alone now. We can talk," he said, his voice firm and authoritative. Clara shuddered upon hearing the confirmation that something was being hidden. She continued to watch as Arthur conversed quietly on the phone, each word he said adding to the mystery and depth of her suspicions. Who was on the other line? What was the secret he was so carefully guarding? As Arthur continued his secret conversation, Clara knew she needed more information before confronting him. She was determined to uncover the whole truth, whatever the cost. With this firm resolution in mind, she prepared for what was to come, knowing that the next chapter of her investigation would be crucial. The following morning dawned clear and bright, with the first rays of sunlight subtly infiltrating through the heavy curtains of Arthur's suite. Clara arrived at work with her mind restless, filled with suspicions and unanswered questions. She had spent the night tossing in her bed, the events of the previous day replaying in her head like an endless movie. Determined to get answers, she entered Arthur's room with a clear purpose, the breakfast tray in her hands, trembling slightly with her resolve. Arthur was sitting up in bed, the morning newspaper spread out in front of him, displaying a studied fragility. He looked up at Clara with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning, Clara. How are you today?" "I'm fine, Mr. Enigo," Clara responded, placing the tray on the table next to the bed with more force than intended. "But I would like to ask you a question, if I may." Arthur set the newspaper aside, a trace of caution crossing his expression. "Of course, Clara. What would you like to know?" She took a deep breath, looking him straight in the eye. "Why are you pretending, Mr. Enigo?" The question came out sharper than she had planned, her words charged with a silent accusation. Arthur leaned back, his eyes fixed on hers. He sighed deeply, an expression of resignation crossing his face. "Clara, I have my reasons," he began, his voice low and steady. "There's more at stake here than you can imagine." Clara felt a wave of frustration, but also curiosity. "I'm here every day, taking care of you, watching, and last night I saw things that I can't understand. You seem much better than you claim to be. I need you to be honest with me. What's going on?" Arthur ran his hand through his hair, clearly pondering how much to reveal. "Clara, I'm in a very delicate position. Some issues, family and personal matters, need to be resolved in a very specific way. It's not just about me." She crossed her arms, her patience quickly draining. "Family issues? Are you talking about your daughter, Livia? Is this about her?" Arthur looked at Clara, surprised by her insight. "You are very observant, Clara. Yes, it involves Livia, among other things. I need to make things right this time. And to do that, I need more time." Clara hesitated, Arthur's words casting new light on his actions. The seriousness and vulnerability in his voice made her reconsider her initial approach. "I want to help, Mr. Enigo. but I can't do that based on half-truths." Arthur nodded, seeming relieved by her response. "I understand your position, and I appreciate your honesty. Perhaps it's time I tell you more about what's going on, but I ask that you keep this between us for now." Clara agreed, curiosity and a sense of duty mixing within her. "All right, Mr. Enigo, I will keep your confidence, but I expect the truth, nothing less." "Of course, Clara. Let's talk after breakfast," Arthur suggested, a gesture she accepted with a nod, her mind already spinning with the possibilities of what was to come. As Clara withdrew to prepare Arthur's medication, she reflected on the complexity of the situation. There was still much she didn't know, and each piece of information could be crucial. Prepared for Arthur's revelation, she knew that the next chapter of this story would change everything. Clara left the hospital that afternoon with her mind in turmoil, Arthur's revelations still echoing in her thoughts. He had pleaded for her discretion and understanding, detailing the complexities of his relationship with his daughter, Livia. "I'm trying to fix things," he had said with a mix of desperation and determination. "But it's not as simple as it seems." As she drove to the coastal town where Livia lived, Clara reflected on Arthur's words. If he was truly seeking redemption, why choose such a tortuous, deceit-filled path? If he wants to reconcile, why not just tell the truth, she thought, her hands firm on the steering wheel. The road unfolded before her, each mile bringing her closer to Livia and, she hoped, to some answers. Livia's town was a vivid painting of blues and greens, where the sea met the sky in an indistinguishable horizon. Clara parked her car near a small house facing the sea, the sound of waves breaking on the shore forming a continuous backdrop. She took a deep breath, tasting the salt in the air, and walked up to the front door. After ringing the bell, a strong, independent-looking woman opened the door. It was Livia, no doubt, with the same penetrating eyes as Arthur, but tempered with a softness that was all her own. "Livia Enigo?" Clara asked, even though she already knew the answer. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" Livia replied, a furrow of curiosity forming between her brows. "My name is Clara. I'm your father's nurse," she began, noting the immediate change in Livia's expression. A shadow of reserve passed over her face. "I know this might seem a bit unexpected, but I needed to talk to you about your father, with his permission, of course." Livia hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Come in, please. Let's talk on the porch." The two women sat facing each other, the turbulent sea in the background. Clara explained the reason for her visit, trying to convey the urgency and complexity of the situation without betraying Arthur's trust. Livia listened attentively, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. When Clara finished, she sighed deeply. "My father has always been a complicated man. He lives in a world where everything must be done his way, and that has driven us apart. He seems genuinely remorseful, Livia. He talks about wanting to make amends for the mistakes he's made with you," Clara responded, hoping to touch the heart of the woman in front of her. Livia looked out to the sea, pensive. "Maybe he is, but why now? Why in such a dramatic and obscure way? It doesn't change the past." Clara nodded, understanding Livia's reluctance. "I know it doesn't, but maybe it's worth trying to understand what he's trying to do now. He told me you're all he has, and he fears time is running out to make things right." Livia looked at Clara, a mix of emotion and skepticism in her eyes. "I'm not sure if I'm ready to forgive or even understand, but I appreciate you coming here to tell me this." Clara stood up, extending her hand. "If you need anything, please let me know." Livia grasped her hand, a gesture of thanks. "Thank you, Clara. I'll think about all this." As Clara left Livia's house, she felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. She knew she had planted a seed, something that might grow over time and bring some resolution to the family conflict. However, Livia's doubts were valid, and the road to reconciliation seemed still uncertain and winding. Clara drove back to the city with her mind full of thoughts about the encounter. She felt she had done the right thing by connecting with Livia, but knew that the final decision about any reconciliation would be up to her and her father. Clara's role was that of an intermediary, a facilitator of dialogue, but she wondered how far she could or should get involved. As she reflected on these issues, Clara decided she needed more information to better understand what Arthur really wanted and what the potential consequences of his actions could be. The next step would be to confront Arthur again, this time with a new understanding of Livia's concerns. Clara knew she needed a firmer and more direct approach to ensure that Arthur understood the implications of his actions, not just for himself, but for his family as well. Arriving at the hospital, Clara prepared for a difficult conversation. She felt like a piece in a much larger game, whose rules were not yet fully clear. But her determination to help both the patient and his daughter find some kind of peace propelled her forward. The nurse walked down the corridor towards Arthur's room, the folder with medical notes in one hand, and a heart that was heavy but hopeful. She knew that the words to be exchanged could trigger significant changes in the dynamics between father and daughter. Taking a deep breath, Clara knocked on Arthur's door, ready for whatever came next. The hours ahead would be crucial to understanding Arthur's true intentions and how he would respond to learning of Livia's reflections. Clara was ready to help navigate these turbulent waters, hoping that, in some way, she could contribute to a reconciliation, or at least to a mutual understanding. She slowly opened the door, the soft click of the doorknob signaling the beginning of a new chapter in the complex story of this family. The sun was setting over the small coastal town when Clara returned to Livia's house. The sky's colors blended in shades of orange and pink, reflecting off the calm sea waves. She walked along the stone path, leading to Livia and Ricardo's modest yet welcoming home, feeling the fine sand beneath her shoes. Upon arrival, she was greeted by Ricardo, a medium-built man with tousled hair and a warm smile. "Clara, right? Livia mentioned you'd be coming. Please come in and make yourself at home," he said, guiding her into the living room, where a large window offered a stunning view of the twilight over the sea. Livia was standing, gazing at the horizon. She turned at the sound of Clara's footsteps and smiled faintly, though her eyes revealed some reserve. "Hi, Clara. Thank you for coming. Let's sit outside, it's nicer," she suggested, leading them to a wooden porch with several chairs and a small table. Once settled, the trio sat in momentary silence, listening only to the sound of the waves gently breaking on the shore. Finally, Livia broke the silence, her tone laden with restrained emotion. "My father, he never really accepted my choice. After I chose to live with Ricardo, away from the family business and the life of luxury, he drifted away. He didn't understand, or maybe didn't want to understand, that I needed to follow my own path." Ricardo held Livia's hand, offering her silent support. Clara recognized the depth of their bond, the mutual understanding they shared. "It's hard when our parents' expectations don't match our own aspirations," Clara responded, trying to connect with Livia's reality. "Yes, it is. And now he's ill, saying he wants to fix things." Livia continued, her voice wavering. "But why now? After all these years of silence and distance?" Clara listened attentively, weighing each word. "I think, sometimes, facing one's own mortality makes people reconsider their priorities. Perhaps your father really wants to mend the relationship with you, Livia. He spoke a lot about the regret he feels." Livia sighed, looking back at the sea. "I want to believe that, Clara. I really do. but there's so much resentment, so much pain built up. That's understandable, Clara affirmed. And there's no easy answer. But perhaps over time you might find some common ground, even if it's just to understand each other a bit better. Ricardo, who had been quiet, finally spoke. Livia, maybe it's time to at least hear what your father has to say. We're not saying you have to forgive everything right away, but understanding his reasons might help heal some of those old wounds. Livia nodded, still uncertain. Maybe you're right. I'll think about it. She looked at Clara, a glint of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you for making the long trip here and for bringing a bit of his perspective. Clara smiled, feeling she had done the right thing by coming. I'm here to help, Livia, whenever you need. As the night fell, the three continued to talk about lighter memories, allowing the sea breeze to ease the tension of the meeting. Clara realized that the situation was more complicated than she had expected, but she also saw an opportunity for reconciliation, or at least understanding. As she said goodbye, she knew that the next step would be crucial. Back at the hospital, it would be necessary to speak with Arthur again, this time with a new understanding of his daughter's hopes and hesitations. When Clara returned to the hospital, the hallway was quiet, with only the soft sound of staff footsteps echoing off the polished floor. Her meeting with Livia had left a lasting impression, filling her with a renewed sense of purpose and determination to help reconcile father and daughter. However, she knew there were still missing pieces in Artur's story, pieces that perhaps only Eduardo could provide. Eduardo, the chief medical officer and a longtime friend of Artur, was waiting for her in his office, a space filled with medical books and diplomas. He looked at Clara with a serious expression as she entered. Clara, we need to talk about Mr. Enigo's situation, he began, gesturing for her to sit down. I was hoping we could talk, Clara replied, taking a seat across from Eduardo's desk, her posture stiff, reflecting her anxiety. There are many things about his condition that are unclear to me. Eduardo nodded, running his hand through his graying hair. I understand your concerns, and I believe it's time to clarify some things. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Artur is indeed ill, Clara. He's been diagnosed with a rare condition that affects his nervous system. It's a serious and progressive situation, but he wants to keep it private. Clara absorbed the information, a mix of relief and new concern taking over. I see. That explains a lot. But why keep it a secret? And how does this relate to his daughter, Livia? Eduardo sighed, looking at a photograph on his desk before continuing. Artur fears that if Livia finds out about his illness, only through medical documents or third parties, it might drive her further away. He wants to use this situation to show her that he has changed, that he's trying to be the father he never was. Clara reflected on the implications of this strategy. But isn't that a bit risky? Using his illness as a bridge to rebuild a relationship might end up having the opposite effect. It's a risk, yes, Eduardo admitted, frowning. But Artur is desperate. He sees this as his last chance to make things right before his condition worsens. I see, Clara said thoughtfully. And what is your role in all this, Eduardo? How do you feel about helping to keep this kind of secret? Eduardo looked at Clara, his expression conflicted. As a doctor, my priority is my patient's well-being. However, as a friend, I want to help Artur achieve his goal of reconciling with Livia. It's a delicate balance, Clara. I understand, Clara murmured, feeling the complexity of the situation involving ethics and personal emotions. And now, what should we do? For now, we continue as we are. But I think you, being the nurse who is closest to both Artur and Livia, could play a crucial role in this reconciliation. You could help facilitate more open communication between them, suggested Eduardo, looking hopeful. Clara nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. "I'll do what I can. They both deserve a chance to make things right." With a plan in mind and new information to digest, Clara left Eduardo's office, determined to help rebuild the fragile relationship between father and daughter. She knew the coming weeks would be challenging, but she was ready to face whatever came next. With a new sense of purpose, she walked back to Arthur's room, ready to discuss the next step of their plan with him, thus beginning a new chapter in this complex saga. The idea of a surprise birthday party for Livia had been suggested by Arthur during one of his long conversations with Clara. Despite his debilitating condition, his eyes shone with a mix of hope and urgency at the thought of reconciling with his daughter. "Clara, do you think we could do something special for Livia's birthday here at the hospital? Maybe a small surprise party? I really want to show her that I'm trying to change," he had said, his voice laden with emotion. Moved by Arthur's sincere regret, Clara agreed to help plan the event. She knew that execution would rely heavily on the support of Eduardo, who, as the chief medical officer, had access to hospital resources and spaces that could be used for the party. Eduardo, for his part, had his reservations, but recognized the importance of the gesture for Arthur's emotional recovery. "Arthur, we're taking a risk, but I understand how much this means to you. We'll organize something discreet yet memorable. However, it's essential that Livia is on board with this. We can't force her to participate." With this in mind, Clara called Ricardo, explaining the situation and asking for his help to persuade Livia. Ricardo, always the mediator, understood the delicacy of the plan and talked with Livia, encouraging her to give her father a chance. "Honey, I know it's complicated, and you have every reason to hesitate," Ricardo told Livia during one of their seaside walks. "But maybe this party could be a new beginning, or at least a chance to see some changes in your father." Livia sighed, looking out to the horizon. "Ricardo, I don't know. It's all so strange, but I understand what you're saying. I'll think about it." After hours of reflection and more conversations with Ricardo, Livia finally agreed, albeit with reservations. "Okay, I'll go, but only because you believe it could be good. And I'll go for Clara too. She has been incredibly kind and thoughtful." With Livia's consent, Clara and Eduardo mobilized to organize the party. They decided to hold it in the hospital garden, an open and pleasant space that would provide a lighter and less clinical atmosphere. Clara handled the details, such as ordering a birthday cake and decorating the area with subtle balloons and flowers, while Eduardo coordinated logistics with the hospital staff to ensure everything ran smoothly. On the day of the party, Arthur was dressed in a new shirt that Clara had helped choose, his expression anxious yet hopeful. As guests began to arrive, he positioned himself near the garden entrance, his heart pounding with each sound of footsteps. When Livia arrived, accompanied by Ricardo, her look was cautious yet curious. She looked around, surprised by the simple beauty of the decorations and the visible effort that had been put into the event. "Happy birthday, Livia," Clara greeted her with a warm hug. "I hope you like what we've prepared for you." Livia smiled, her gaze scanning the garden until it landed on Arthur, who awaited her with a mix of nervousness and emotion. "Thank you, Clara. This is all very beautiful." The first moments of the party were tense, but as guests began to interact, the atmosphere gradually became more relaxed. Arthur approached Livia, each of his steps laden with meaning. "Livia, he began, his voice trembling. The reunion between father and daughter was about to unfold, and Clara watched attentively, ready to intervene if necessary, as the next chapter in their story began to unfold. The birthday party, meticulously arranged in the hospital garden, presented a serene beauty, contrasting with the underlying tension that hung in the air as Livia and Arthur approached each other. The guests, sensing the delicacy of the moment, conversed in low tones, casting furtive glances towards the two. Soft music played in the background, but its melody was nearly drowned out by the sounds of conversation and the gentle wind that fluttered ribbons and balloons. Arthur, his expression a mix of anxiety and hope, took a step towards Livia, who stood with Ricardo, her face reflecting a complex mix of emotions. Clara watched closely, ready to intervene if necessary, but hoping father and daughter would find a path to reconciliation on their own. "Livia, my dear," Arthur began, his voice trembling slightly. "I know there are many things that need to be said, many things that need to be explained." Livia, holding Ricardo's hand, looked at her father with a mix of caution and curiosity. "Dad, I came because Ricardo and Clara thought we should give this a chance. But I need to understand. Why now? After so long?" Arthur took a deep breath, searching for the courage to express his deepest feelings. "I'm sick, Livia, really sick." His voice broke and he struggled to continue. I have a condition that doesn't leave much time, and it made me think about life, about the mistakes I've made. All I want now, more than anything, is a chance to make things right with you." Livia looked at her father, her eyes filling with tears as the reality of his words began to sink in. "You're really sick?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Yes, dear, I am," Arthur confirmed, tears starting to form in his own eyes. "I wish I had been different before. Now, all I ask for is an opportunity to show that I can be the father you deserve." The tension between the two was palpable, and the guests watched with a mix of hope and concern. Overwhelmed by the emotions of the moment, Livia felt a whirlwind of conflicting feelings. She looked to Ricardo for support, and he squeezed her hand in encouragement. "Dad, I don't know what to say," Livia murmured, tears now freely running down her face. "This is a lot to process. I didn't expect—" "I understand, my daughter. I understand," Arthur said, taking a hesitant step towards her, as if wanting to embrace her but uncertain of her reception. Livia, moved and confused by the flood of emotions, suddenly felt overwhelmed. "I need a moment," she said quickly, turning and leaving the room, leaving behind a trail of surprised and concerned looks. Clara, watching the scene unfold, knew that things were far from resolved. Livia needed space to digest the news and reconcile her conflicting emotions. As she hurried after Livia to offer support, Arthur remained where he was, a figure of remorse and hope, surrounded by guests who murmured words of comfort. The party, though beginning with a promise of celebration, had turned into a stage for a profound emotional confrontation, and as Clara reached Livia, trying to comfort her, she knew the next steps would be crucial for the future of their relationship. With Livia out of the room and Arthur struggling to maintain his composure, the next chapter of this complex family story was just beginning. Livia's birthday party had ended in an atmosphere of palpable uncertainty and emotion. As the last guests left the hospital garden, Clara helped tidy up the remnants of the celebration, but her mind was restless, swirling with the revelations and Livia's reactions. Determined to seek more answers about Arthur's real condition, she headed to Eduardo's office, where she knew the medical records were kept. The office was quiet and dimly lit, with only the light from a desk lamp casting shadows over the stacks of documents and medical books. Clara began to search cautiously, trying not to disturb Eduardo's meticulous order. Guided by a firm intuition, her hands found a thick file marked with the name Arthur Enigo. With trembling hands, Clara opened the file and flipped through the documents, each page revealing more details about Arthur's condition. She found the medical report Eduardo had vaguely mentioned in previous conversations. Reading carefully, Clara discovered that Arthur indeed had a terminal neurological condition in its early stages. However, the documentation suggested that while serious, the disease's progression could be slow, and the prognosis was not as immediately fatal as Arthur had made it seem. Clara sat down, stunned by the discovery. She now understood Arthur's desperation to reunite his family, but couldn't help feeling a twinge of indignation at the manipulation of the truth. With the documents in hand, she knew she needed to confront Eduardo. He was aware of the true extent of Arthur's illness and had chosen, for reasons Clara hoped to understand, to support his friend in a dramatized portrayal. Leaving the office with the documents carefully reorganized, Clara found Eduardo in the hallway, looking surprised to see her with such a grave expression. "Eduardo, we need to talk," Clara began, her voice firm despite the whirlwind of emotions. "I found Arthur's medical reports in your office. Why is he exaggerating the severity of his condition?" Eduardo sighed, the weight of the situation marking his features. "Clara, I knew this moment would come. Arthur is desperate to amend his mistakes with Livia before his illness becomes debilitating. He feared that the true nature of his condition wouldn't be enough to bring her back in time." Clara shook her head, disappointed and confused. "But Eduardo, lying about his health, that's not going to help build the trust he so desperately wants to regain with his daughter, not when she finds out the truth." I know, Eduardo admitted, running a hand through his hair. "And I'm beginning to question whether I supported the right decision. But Arthur is my longtime friend, and I wanted to help him in his quest for redemption." Clara looked at Eduardo, recognizing the complexity of the emotions and loyalties involved. "Eduardo, we need to be honest with Livia. She deserves to know the whole truth." Eduardo agreed with a hesitant nod. "You're right, Clara. We need to plan how we'll approach this with her." Resolved to correct the course of events, Clara and Eduardo planned to reveal the whole truth to Livia, hoping that honesty might pave the way for genuine and lasting reconciliation. With the documents still in hand and a renewed determination, Clara headed to Arthur's room, ready to discuss how they would present the truth to Livia, thus beginning a new chapter in this intricate web of truths and lies. The atmosphere in Arthur's room was tense, laden with the expectation of a difficult conversation. Clara entered, the documents revealing the truth about Arthur's condition firmly in hand, her expression determined yet slightly apprehensive. Arthur was sitting, staring out the window with a distant look, visibly concerned about recent events and the upcoming discussion. "Arthur, we need to talk," Clara began, her voice calm but firm. Arthur slowly turned to face her, a flicker of fear passing through his eyes. "Clara, I can tell from your tone that the news isn't good," he said, trying to maintain a facade of calm. Clara sat next to him, placing the documents on the bedside table. "Arthur, I found out the truth about your illness. You are not as sick as you led us to believe." Her voice was gentle, yet direct, each word laden with weight and significance. Arthur sighed deeply, closing his eyes for a moment before meeting her gaze again. "Clara, I did it out of desperation. I wanted Livia to come back to me, and I thought if she believed I was dying." "You can't force Livia to forgive through lies," Clara interrupted, frustration and care mixing in her voice. "That won't restore your relationship. It will only make things worse when she finds out the truth. And she will find out, Arthur." Arthur lowered his head, clearly disheartened by the truth in Clara's words. "You're right, Clara. I fear I may have really made a mistake again," he murmured, his voice laden with remorse. "Arthur, what you wanted to achieve was noble. but the way you tried to do it wasn't fair. Not just to Livia, but to all of us who care about you and her. Clara continued, trying to steer the conversation towards a productive path. I know, Arthur agreed, looking at her with the expression of someone who had recognized their mistakes. What can I do now, Clara? How can I start to fix this? Start with the truth, Clara suggested. Let's tell Livia everything, not just about your illness, but also about your reasons. She needs to hear it from you, not through documents or from third parties. Arthur nodded slowly, seeming to accept the inevitability of the situation. You're right. Let's do that. Let's tell her everything. Clara looked at Arthur, feeling a mix of compassion and resolve. I'll be by your side when you tell her. I'll help explain the medical situation, if that helps. Thank you, Clara. I don't know what I'd do without you here, Arthur said, a thread of gratitude in his voice. With the decision made, Clara and Arthur spent the next few moments discussing how they would approach the conversation with Livia, planning every detail carefully. They knew that the coming hours would be crucial, not just for Arthur's relationship with his daughter, but for the reconciliation of a long-fragmented family. With preparations underway, Clara left Arthur's room to make some necessary phone calls, while Arthur mentally braced himself for one of the most difficult moments of his life. Both knew that the next chapter of their story was about to begin, and the decisions made now could define the future of their family relationships. The afternoon was windy, and the turbulent sea threw foamy waves against the sand as Clara walked along the beach looking for Livia. She knew she would find Livia there, a place that had always served as a refuge for the young teacher whenever she needed to think. Clara spotted Livia from a distance, standing at the water's edge, watching the waves break with a contemplative expression. Approaching cautiously, Clara called her name. Livia. Livia turned around, a slight startle on her face at seeing Clara. Clara, any news from the hospital? Her voice carried a mix of hope and apprehension. Clara nodded, her heart heavy with the burden of the truth she was about to reveal. Can we talk? It's important. Livia agreed, and together they walked a bit further away from the other people on the beach, finding a more secluded spot next to a group of rocks that offered some shelter from the wind. What happened, Clara? Is it about my dad? Livia asked, her anxiety growing. Clara took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. Livia, I found out some things about your father's condition, things that I think you need to know. She paused, watching Livia's reaction. Livia stared intently at Clara, instinctively bracing for bad news. What is it? Your father is sick, Livia. That's true. He has a rare neurological disease, and although it's not immediately fatal, it's serious and will get worse, Clara began, her voice steady despite the discomfort of the topic. Livia absorbed the words, her face pale against the backdrop of the choppy sea. And what else? Clara continued. He exaggerated the severity of his condition initially. He thought that by doing so, he could motivate you to come back to him more quickly, so they could fix things while he still has time. Livia recoiled as if she had been physically struck. So, he lied? He used his illness to manipulate the situation? Her voice was a mix of incredulity and anger. Yes, he did, Clara admitted, but he is remorseful, Livia, and he really wants to fix things with you. Livia looked out to the horizon, her hands trembling slightly. This is a lot to process. I don't know what to feel, Clara. I'm furious, yes, but to know he is actually sick. Her voice faltered, and she fell silent. I understand how you feel, Clara said, placing a hand on Livia's shoulder in a gesture of comfort. It's a lot to handle all at once. But perhaps with this new truth, there can be room for some forgiveness, for a new beginning. Livia sighed, looking back at Clara again. Thank you for telling me. I need some time to think about all this. Clara nodded. Of course, take all the time you need. I'll be here for whatever you need. The two women parted with a tight hug, and Clara watched as Livia walked alone along the beach, lost in thought. Heading back to her car, Clara knew that Livia's next decisions would be crucial, and all she could do was wait and offer her support. With that, she braced herself for the next chapter, knowing that the day's revelations could forever change the dynamics between father and daughter. After several days of reflection and inner struggle, Livia decided to visit Arthur in the hospital. The beach had given her the space to think, but now she needed answers directly from him, needed to see his condition with her own eyes, and perhaps find a way to forgive. As she arrived at the hospital, Livia felt her heart speed up with each step that brought her closer to Arthur's room. Clara, who had been informed of the visit, met Livia at the entrance to the room. "Livia, how are you feeling?" Clara asked, offering an encouraging smile. "A bit nervous, but I think I'm ready," Livia responded, trying to steady the tremor in her voice. Clara nodded and opened the door, letting Livia enter first. Arthur was sitting on the bed, looking out the window. At the sound of the door, he turned, and upon seeing Livia, his eyes filled with emotion. "Livia," he began, his voice faltering a bit. "You came." Livia took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I came, Dad. Clara told me everything." Arthur lowered his head, clearly ashamed. "I'm sorry, Livia, for everything." Livia approached, sitting beside him on the bed. There was so much she wanted to say, so much pain accumulated, but seeing him there, frail and remorseful, her words failed her. Arthur, sensing her hesitation, took her hands in his, seeking to make a connection. "Livia, I know I messed up. I was foolish to think that manipulating the truth could bring us together faster. I just wanted you near me before it was too late," he confessed, his tears starting to flow. Livia looked at their intertwined hands, feeling the weight of his words. Seeing her father so vulnerable, hearing the sincerity in his voice, moved her in a way she hadn't expected. She looked up, her own eyes brimming with tears. "I don't know if I can just forget everything, Dad. So much has happened." "I don't expect you to forget, Livia. I just hope we can start to build something new, something true this time," Arthur said, gently squeezing her hands. Livia, touched by her father's belated honesty, felt a knot unravel within her. "I'll try, Dad. I'll try to understand and see where this leads us," she promised, the tears now flowing freely. The two remained like that for a moment, crying together, sharing a space of pain and hope. It was a start, perhaps fragile, but a start. After some time, Clara, who had been discreetly watching nearby, sensed it was time to give them some space. She quietly withdrew, leaving father and daughter alone to continue their conversation. As Livia and Arthur talked more about the past, about mistakes and the possibilities of the future, each began to see the other in a new light. And as they talked, paving the way for more understanding and perhaps forgiveness, the foundations for a new relationship were slowly being built. With new promises of honesty and attempts at understanding, they were laying the groundwork for the next steps in their lives, ready to face together whatever the future held, thus beginning a new chapter in their lives. After the revelations and the emotional conversation at the hospital, Arthur, feeling strengthened by the newfound closeness with Livia, made a decision he had long contemplated. During a quiet morning, as a gentle sun streamed through the window of his hospital room, he called Clara for a serious conversation. "Clara, I've been thinking a lot about what remains of my life and how I'd like to spend it," Arthur began, his gaze fixed on the scenery outside, reflecting an unusual calmness. "I don't want to spend my last days in this hospital. I would like to go home, to be in a familiar place, surrounded by the people I love." Clara, though not surprised by the decision, felt a pang of concern. "Arthur, I understand your desire, and it's completely valid. But we need to ensure that you have all the necessary medical support. I can help with that, arrange home care, everything to ensure your comfort and safety." Arthur nodded gratefully. "I knew I could count on you, Clara. Your support has been invaluable." That same day, Arthur summoned Livia and Ricardo to discuss his plan. Livia, still processing the new dynamics with her father, felt a mix of sadness and relief at his decision. Ricardo, always by Livia's side, offered his unconditional support. "I would like to spend the time I have left at home with you nearby," explained Arthur, his voice firm but laden with emotion. "Not just as a means of being comfortable, but as a chance for us to truly be together as a family, perhaps for the first time." Livia held Ricardo's hand, seeking strength from him. "Dad, we'll help. We'll organize everything so you can be at home, in comfort." She paused, swallowing hard. "I want these months to be good for you, for us." Ricardo agreed, adding, "We'll be with you, Arthur. Whatever you need, we'll be there." With the plans agreed upon, Clara immediately began organizing the preparations for Arthur's transfer. She contacted home care services, arranged for the delivery of necessary medical equipment, and coordinated with the hospital team to ensure a smooth transition. In the following days, as the arrangements were made, Arthur watched with a sense of anticipation and gratitude. The idea of returning home to the environment he loved, where he had memories of happier days, gave him a new sense of energy. Finally, the day of the move arrived. Clara supervised the entire process, ensuring that Arthur was comfortably settled into his home, which was now equipped to meet all his medical needs. As Arthur settled into his old favorite armchair, looking around the room he cherished so much, he felt a peace he hadn't felt in a long time. Livia and Ricardo by his side shared a look of hope and determination. Together, they began to navigate this new phase, ready to make the most of the days ahead, thus starting a new chapter in their lives. As the days passed, Arthur's home transformed into a sanctuary of emotions, memories, and significant moments, all woven around the time they had left together. Mornings began with the gentle sound of waves in the distance, a constant reminder of the world moving outside the tranquil walls where Arthur now spent his days. Each day was a new opportunity for Arthur, Livia, and Ricardo to strengthen the bonds that had long been fragile. Despite his progressive illness, Arthur often showed a rejuvenated spirit, fueled by the constant presence of his daughter and Ricardo. On a particularly clear afternoon, when the sun bathed the room in its golden light, Arthur called Livia to sit beside him. His gaze was fixed on the photographs decorating the room, each one telling stories of simpler times. "Livia," Arthur began, his voice laden with palpable emotion, "I know we can't reclaim the lost years, but these days, they've been some of the happiest of my life." Livy, holding her father's hand, felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Dad, I'm happy too. Being here with you has helped me see everything in a different light." Ricardo, always an attentive observer, joined them, bringing an old music box that had belonged to Livia's mother. As he opened the box, its gentle melody filled the room, evoking memories of happier days. "I thought this might remind us of good times," Ricardo said as the music played softly in the background. Arthur smiled, grateful. "Thank you, Ricardo. It's good to remember." In the days that followed, they created new memories. Every shared meal, Every story told, every moment of shared silence added layers to their reconnection. Clara, visiting frequently to check on Arthur, also found herself involved in these interactions, witnessing the transformation of the relationship between father and daughter. One evening, as dusk fell and the room's light faded to the soft glow of lamps, Arthur expressed a wish. "I'd like to go to the beach one more time, feel the sand, hear the real sound of the waves." Touched by the simple yet deeply significant request, Livia looked to Ricardo, who nodded in agreement. "Let's do it, Dad. Let's plan for this weekend." With that decided, they spent the following days preparing everything for the small beach trip, ensuring Arthur could enjoy the day with all the necessary comfort. As they organized the trip, Arthur, Livia and Ricardo not only shared the anticipation of the day at the beach, but also every present moment, every small victory over time and illness. With preparations for the outing underway, they did not realize that each day was, in fact, paving the way for the next chapter, one that would bring closure to many things left unsaid and feelings unresolved. The afternoon when Arthur departed was calm, the sky painted with soft hues of twilight. In the comfort of his home, surrounded by his family, he took his last breath, peaceful and painless, after months of reconnection and redemption. Livia was by his side, holding his hand gently, while Ricardo in the background silently observed, providing his unwavering support. In the days leading up to his passing, Arthur shared many moments of love and forgiveness with his daughter and Ricardo, strengthening the bonds that had long been worn thin. They talked about many things, laughter and tears mingling with their words. At the moment of his departure, the room was quiet. Only the soft sound of Arthur's breathing, which gradually grew lighter until it ceased altogether. Livia, feeling the tightness in her heart, whispered a final goodbye, thanking her father for the chance at reconciliation. After his passing, during the reading of the will, it became clear that Arthur had made one final effort to show his support for his daughter's passions. He left a significant portion of his fortune to various educational foundations, a decision that honored Livia's career as an educator and her dedication to making a difference in children's lives. "He learned, after all," Livia remarked later to Clara, as they both looked out at the sea, a place that had been special for their many conversations over the past months. Livia had a sad smile on her lips, an expression of grief mixed with a sense of peace in knowing that her father had truly tried to change. Clara, listening intently, reflected on Livia's words. "Sometimes truth and love come too late, but they still come," she thought, gazing at the horizon where the sky met the sea. It was a truth she had seen unfold many times in her career, but never as deeply as in Arthur and Livia's journey. Their story, though marked by mistakes and missteps, was also a story of redemption. It showed how secrets and lies could deeply wound, but also how truth, when finally revealed and accompanied by genuine actions, had the power to heal and restore broken bonds. This reflection brought Clara to a state of contemplation about human nature and the power of forgiveness. As she and Livia prepared to move forward, they both carried a newfound understanding of life, love, and the importance of facing the truth, no matter how difficult it may be. And as the sun set before them, marking the end of one day and the beginning of another, they knew that, despite the losses, there was also the promise of new beginnings. Life would continue, with its joys and sorrows, and they were ready to face whatever came next, strengthened by the journey they had traveled together. So, if you're not subscribed yet, click on the subscribe button below and join our community. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next videos.